friends. This is the program Empire of Lies, where we discuss manipulation and disinformation in Russian media. A plan no one saw, how Russian television constructs the illusion of a diplomatic breakthrough. A new story has emerged in the Russian media, presented as a major geopolitical turn, the supposed 28-point American peace plan for Ukraine. It's being discussed with the air of insiders as a document that exploded on the global political scene. But this episode of The Big Game clearly demonstrates that this isn't about diplomacy, but an attempt to shape a new information reality in which the US and Russia are supposedly negotiating over the heads of Ukraine and Europe. In fact, no one has seen the text of the document. The White House merely acknowledged the existence of a certain format for discussions, but hasn't confirmed the content of the leaked points. Despite this, Russian anchors are beginning to build policy around a text that exists only as a retelling, primarily from Ukrainian media leaks. And this is precisely what turns the narrative into a tool for influence, not information. How the feeling of a grand deal is created. The presenters begin with a simple thesis. The US has launched a plan, but it is hidden from everyone, including Kyiv and Moscow. This phrase immediately sets the right frame. America is supposedly acting secretly, opaquely, and simultaneously imposing conditions on all parties simultaneously. This benefits the Kremlin because 1. Ukraine appears to be a powerless entity, unaware even of the terms of its own future capitulation. 2. Europe appears humiliated and excluded, supposedly having learned about the fate of security on the continent from the news. 3. Russia appears to be the key negotiator, able to consider the plan, reject it, or dictate its own terms. There is no factual basis for this, but one is not needed here. The informational effect is achieved by the very assumption. So the United States of America has released a 28-point plan into the media, but apparently someone has probably seen the original so far. But in our country, they definitely haven't seen it. In any case, Moscow, as Dmitry Peskov reported, hasn't announced Zelensky's agreement to negotiate on the US plan. RIA Novosti reported this. So what about the White House? Has it confirmed the existence of this plan? Well, apparently, yes, it has. Although, again, it has confirmed its existence, but not the text of this plan. Let's hear from White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. You're misunderstanding the plan. Have you read it? No, you haven't. Have you read the one-sided reports? I need you to understand that the administration is communicating with both sides as equals. Have you seen President Trump speak directly with both Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky? His national security team did the same. Special Envoy Witkow and Secretary of State Rubio met with the Ukrainians last week to discuss this plan. The White House as confirmation, but without text. Then the broadcast switches to White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. However, her commentary is extremely general. The US is talking to both sides, listening and searching for an acceptable path. This is typical diplomatic language, containing no conditions or acknowledgement of the plan. But the Russian studio immediately concludes, if there are meetings, then there is an ultimatum for Zelensky to sign the document before Thanksgiving. A simple logical substitution. The existence of negotiations is transformed into the existence of a specific text and strict deadlines. This creates a sense of pressure, despite the lack of evidence. Imposing content. How a plan is transformed into a fight aficionado. The host then read out the points of the supposed plan, not from an official document, but from retellings of leaks in the Ukrainian press. However, these points are presented as material for discussion, limiting the Ukrainian armed forces to 600,000 troops, enforcing Ukraine's neutrality, a guarantee of Russia's non-aggression against Europe, a ban on Ukraine joining NATO, as enshrined in the alliance's charter, the deployment of European fighter jets in Poland, Ukraine's renunciation of some territories. In other words, the Russian studio is discussing its own interests, presented as American proposals. This is an important technique, shifting the boundaries of what is possible toward Russian demands, and getting the audience accustomed to the idea that these demands are legitimate. Key point: America negotiates, Russia dictates. Discussing the points, the participants in the broadcast consistently convey the following idea: the United States is formulating a plan solely in its own interests. But this plan does not sufficiently take into account Moscow's concerns. Therefore, Russia should not agree. This creates the image of a country in a position of strength. The plan is being imposed on it, but it can refuse. And simultaneously, it creates the image of the United States recognizing the reality of Russian control over the occupied territories, but demanding too much in exchange. This is an attempt to turn aggression into a negotiating position and occupation into part of an international agreement. Think, analyze, draw conclusions, and don't be fooled. This was the Empire of Lies program.